Hello. So today we're going to be talking about the progressive educational movement. It began in the late 1800s and spanned on to the early 1900s. All the information today is going to be from, I should show you this side, this book, which is by Carol Garnett Mooney, and it's called Theories of Childhood, the second edition. So the progressive movement, it was to reform the education that was previously and is now unfortunately currently the standard practice, which focused more on rote memorization, teacher in the front, students in their desks, they take orders from the teacher, and they follow a set curriculum that's pretty well standard for at least the whole classroom, if not like the whole district. So the progressive movement wanted to focus on child-centered learning. Some of their main components were thematic units. So if a child had an interest in insects, they'd go out, they'd study insects, they'd study the environment, they'd study their habitat, they'd count them, whatever was relevant to the child's interest that could be pursued through a theme. And they also were very into critical thinking and diversity. So that was kind of their main thing. Even though it wasn't an organized movement, it was more of a new idea. Two of the main contributors are who we're going to talk about today. The first one is John Dewey. He was born in America in 1859, and he earned his PhD in philosophy. He went on to teach in the University of Michigan, where he befriended his student and then married her. And she really sparked his interest in early childhood education because her passion was childhood education and how it fit with society. And so he took that and he wanted to incorporate educational theory with philosophy and psychology. And so what he did is he went to the University of Chicago and continued teaching, and he established a laboratory school for children. And the research that was done in that school prompted many of his works and vast amounts of other research because they were able to collect such a large amount of data. And through that, he kind of formed his principles for education, and he believed that first and foremost, education should be centered on the child, and the curriculum needs to follow the child's interests, but that the teacher needs to be the guide to the children, and they need to interpret the world for the children. So he believed classrooms should be organized with stimulating materials for the children, and that the curriculums, well, they shouldn't be done away with, but they needed to be individualized, not just for that age group, but for the children specifically in the classroom. And some of his other focuses were on the types of instruction and curriculum that the teachers developed. He didn't believe in things being hands-on for hands-on's sake. It had to have a purpose, and it had to be able to relate what you're doing to what you're thinking about, to how it applies to real life. Everything was very intentional, and he wanted all of the activities that they did in class to be meaningful. One of the other contributors that we're going to talk about is Maria Montessori. And she was born in Italy in, 1870, a long time ago. Anyways, she was one of the first female physicians from where she lived, and she got her medical degree with her emphasis on pediatrics. And then she went on to work in an insane asylum where she was working with children, and she found that those who were deemed unteachable, that if she used scientific observation and really watched them, she could figure out what their needs were and what they were trying to communicate. and that her methods were effectual on them and that they were not, in fact, unteachable. So she put this idea into practice when she opened her Home for Children, which was a school, but as anyone familiar with Montessori knows, it's structured to be more homey and comfortable, so that name makes sense. So her school was designed to keep children off the streets, and she thought that kids needed tools and an environment to learn, and that with those they could take off excuse me, and learn themselves, that they had the intellectual tools they needed to make discoveries for themselves and to really be autonomous and independent. She thought that if a teacher did things for the student that they could do for themselves, it discredited their own autonomy and independence. Let's see. She was also majorly into what the environment looked like. She wanted everything to be comfortable. She wanted everything to be child-sized. She wanted things to be beautiful and cheerful. Child-sized seats and tables didn't exist, so she made them herself. She made a lot of her own activities, and she even had custom stairs designed for her school with small feet in mind. So she really wanted everything in the environment to be conducive with learning and to inspire children to learn independently, to find their own interests and pursue them. So the teacher didn't teach in the front of the classroom. What the teacher would do is walk around the classroom and interact individually or in small groups with children who were doing their own activities or assignments that they designed themselves. And she would work one-on-one with those children. And this worked because they had multi-age classrooms. So typically each classroom had 3 different ages. And the older children were able to mentor and teach the younger children, and the younger children could learn from the older children. And it gave the older children a chance to review material and the younger children a chance to see what was coming up ahead. And they could really combine all of that to see the bigger picture of what they were learning, which was pretty cool for them. And she also really believed in observing the classroom, kind of going with the flow of where the children are. If they need to be outside for a little longer than you anticipated, that was fine. And she just really believed that with the right environment, children could learn independently. They had access to everything in the classroom. They didn't need permission to go get scissors or to start an art project. They could just go and do it. Everything's labeled and organized, and she believed that if everything was labeled and organized with pictures and the word for what it is, that children could first of all get what they need, but then put it back, and that it wouldn't cause chaos in the classroom. So some of the main differences between Dewey and Montessori is that Dewey believes that the teachers are the guides and need to interpret the world for the children, and Montessori believed that the children could interpret the world for themselves. They just need the opportunity, and that teachers and adults present the opportunity to the children. She also put more of an emphasis on the environment. She was more into the beauty and the feel of it, whereas he believed that it should be a nice environment and organized and clean and conducive to learning, but not as much as she was into bringing nature in and just having the overall feel of the classroom. Their classrooms would have been pretty different. And then her other thing was she was the creator of a lot of the tools and child-sized objects. And he was more for structured learning, but based off the child's ideas. So he was structure, she was more freelance. But overall, they both believed that learning needed to be focused on children, and that it shouldn't just be set standards that they are to memorize and regurgitate, that to really learn and to be able to think critically, they needed the opportunity to pursue their own interests, and that when they could do that, they wouldn't need bribes or punishments, that they would just enjoy learning.